안녕하십니까. 식약처 첨단제품허가담당관 김현정입니다. 반갑습니다. 제가 오늘 발표할 내용은 융복합 의료제품 분류 사례에 대해서 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 이제 이런 콘퍼런스도 벌써 4회차라서 많은 분들이 이제 융복합 의료제품에 대한 기본적인 개념들은 많이 알고 계실 텐데요. 그래도 분류 사례를 말씀드리기 전에 간단히 융복합 의료제품에 대한 기본 개념을 좀 말씀드린 후에 그 다음에 식약처 내에서 융복합 의료제품 분류가 어떻게 진행되고 있는지 말씀드린 후 올 한 해 저희 과에서 융복합 의료제품을 분류한 사례에 대해서 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 제가 잘 안 보여서 좀 내려가도록 하겠습니다. 융복합 의료제품의 정의는 융복합 의료제품 민원 조정 및 처리 절차 등에 관한 규정이 되어 있는데요. 각각 약사법과 의료기기법에 정하고 있는 의약품과 의약예품 및 의료기기가 물리화학적으로 결합되거나 그 밖의 방법으로 서로 복합된 결합제품을 융복합 의료제품이라고 얘기하고 있습니다. 각각의 용어 정의는 참고하시면 될 것 같고요. 융복합 의료제품을 이제 형태에 따라서 분류를 해보면 융복합 의료제품을 단일체, 합포장, 동시사용 이렇게 크게 세 가지 형태로 구분을 할 수가 있습니다. 단일체라고 하면은 두 가지 이상의 의료제품이 단일체로, 그러니까 하나로 구성된 의료제품을 말을 하고, 요 밑에 이제 그림을 보시면 예를 들어서 주사침이 달린 프리필드 실린지라든지 아니면 약물 방출, 풍선 카테터 같은 이런 유형의 제품을 단일체인 융복합 의료제품으로 구분하고 있습니다. 그 합포장 융복합 의료제품은 두 개 이상의 개별 의료제품이 하나의 패키지로 구성된 형태의 제품을 말을 합니다. 여기 오른쪽 밑에 그림을 보시면 카테터 세트라고 돼 있는데, 이제 카테터와 약물과 주사침 이런 것들이 이제 약액이나 이런 것들을 주입하기 위해서 하나의 세트로 이렇게 합포장이 된 이런 제품 유형을 말하고 있습니다. 동시사용 제품은 개별적으로 허가를 받아서 각각 유통되고 있는데, 이 제품들이 각각의 그 허가받은 제품 설명서에 따라서 A 제품을 사용할 때는 B 제품을 같이 사용하라 이렇게 이제 제품 설명서에 돼 있거나, 아니면 B 제품은 또 A 제품하고 같이 쓰세요라고 이렇게 설명서에 기재가 돼 있는 이런 제품을 동시사용 융복합 의료제품이라고 하고 있습니다. 융복합 의료제품의 형태는 이렇게 세 가지가 있는데, 그러니까 나라마다 융복합 의료제품으로 포함하고 있는 이 분류가 좀 다릅니다. 그래서 미국 같은 경우에는 단일체, 합포장, 동시사용 이 세 가지를 다 융복합 의료제품의 형태로 보고 있지만, 우리나라의 같은 경우에는 단일체는 이제 융복합 의료제품에 포함이 되지만, 합포장 같은 경우에는 일부는 포함이 되고 또 일부는 포함되지 않을 수도 있습니다. 동시사용 제품은 우리나라에서는 융복합 의료제품으로 보고 있지 않습니다. 그렇다면 합포장 제품 중에 어떤 게 융복합 의료제품에 드는지는 하나의 사용 목적을 갖고 같은 동일한 목적 안에서 그 사용 목적을 이루기 위해서 같이 포장된 제품은 우리나라에서 합포장 융복합 의료제품으로 하고 있지만, 그렇지 않고 하나의 사용 목적에 부합하지 않으면서 독립적으로 사용 가능한 제품을 합포장했을 경우에는 그런 거는 융복합 제품으로 보고 있지 않습니다. 예를 들면 이제 체온계하고 상처에 붙이는 반창고를 두 가지를 같이 패키지로 구성을 한다고 하면, 체온을 재는 거하고 상처를 아무는 데 쓰는 반창고는 그 목적을 봤을 때 동시 사용하는 게 아니라고 생각이 되기 때문에 그런 식으로 구성된 합포장 제품은 융복합 의료 제품에 포함하고 있지 않습니다. 그 다음에 융복합 의료 제품에 보면은 이제 주로 나오는 용어 정의들이 있는데요. 주작용, 보조작용, 제품 분류에 대해서 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 주작용이라고 하면은 융복합 의료 제품의 효능이나 효과, 사용 목적을 나타내는 데 있어서 가장 중요하거나 결정적인 역할을 하는 기능을 말을 하고 있고, 보조작용은 그러한 주작용을 보조하는 기능이나 작용을 말하고 있습니다. 제품 분류는 제품의 모양, 구조, 성상, 성분, 사용 방법, 사용 목적, 효능, 효과, 작용 기전, 작용 기전, 안전성, 유효성에 관한 구체적인 자료 및 객관적인 사회적 인식 등을 종합적으로 고려해서 이 제품이 적용되는 법령과 담당 부서를 정하는 겁니다. 그래서 융복합 의료 제품이 뭐 의약품하고 의료기기가 같이 이제 섞여 있는 그런 제품일 경우에 이것이 어떤 효능과 사용 목적을 나타내는 데 있어서 가장 주된 목적을 나타내는 게 의약품인지 아니면 의료기기가 주가 되는지 이런 것들을 분류하는 것이 제품 분류라고 보시면 되겠습니다. 이제 많이들 알고 계실 텐데요. 융복합 의료 제품의 예시에는 이제 주사침이 달린 프리필드 실린지라든지 약물 반출 스텐트 이런 것들이 있을 수 있습니다. 그래서 많이들 아시고 계시지만 그래도 한번 다시 말씀드리면 주사침이 달린 프리필드 실린지 같은 경우에는 약액을 주입하기 위해서 이제 주사기를 사용하는 거기 때문에 그 주작용은 이제 의약품이 주작용인 융복합 의료 제품이 되겠고, 약물 반출 스텐트 같은 경우에는 좁아진 혈관을 넓히는 그런 기능이 이제 주가 되기 때문에 의료기기가 주작용인 그런 융복합 의료 제품이 되겠습니다. 우리나라에서 이제 융복합 의료 제품과 관련된 관련 법령이라든지 규정을 보시면 이제 박스에 있는 거와 같고요. 우리나라에서는 융복합 의료 제품에 대한 특별한 법은 없습니다. 관련된 법만 있고 단지 융복합 의료 제품 민원 조정 및 처리 절차 등에 관한 규정에 융복합 의료 제품의 정의라든지 절차 등이 명시되어 있습니다. 다음은 이제 식약처에서 융복합 의료 제품을 분류하는 데 있어서 어떤 절차에 따라서 하고 있는지 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 이제 여러분들께서 융복합 의료 제품인지 아닌지 이제 궁금해 하시면 우리 식약처 홈페이지들 중에 식품안전나라의 의약품 통합정보 시스템 사이트가 있습니다. 의약품 안전나라에 들어가셔서 이제 로그인을 하신 후에 상단의 전자민원 신청을 클릭을 하시고 그 다음에 거기서 민원 사무 검색란에 융복합 의료제품 해당 여부를 검색을 하셔서 그 민원을 선택하신 후 민원 신청을 하시면 되겠습니다. 민원 신청을 누르시면 민원 신청 서식이 나오는데 그 안에 이제 내용들을 작성을 해서 저희한테 이제 제출을 해주시면 저희가 그거를 이제 전자 접수를 한 후에 저희 과에서 1차적으로 민원 접수를 한 후 1차 검토를 합니다. 이게 융복합 의료 제품이 맞는지 아니면 맞다면은 주작용이 뭐가 될지를 저희가 1차 검토한 후에 그 다음에 이제 관련 부서라고 하면은 각각의 정책과들, 의약품 정책과, 의료기기 정책과, 바이오 정책과 해당되는 정책과에다가 저희가 검토한 것에 대해서 1차 분류에 대한 검토 의견을 묻습니다. 그러면은 그거에 대해서 회신이 오면은 저희가 민원 신청을 해서 접수한 지 14일 이내에 민원인들에게 그 해당 여부를 알려드리고 있습니다. 나머지 단계들은 이렇게 한번 보시면 되겠습니다. 융복합 의료 제품 분류 흐름도를 이렇게 한번 만들어 봤는데요. 이것도 한번 참고하시면 될 것 같습니다. 융복합 의료 제품 주작용을 판단하는 기준은 저희가 주로 3가지를 하고 있는데요. 기존에 있던 이제 유사 제품들이 기 분류가 어떻게 돼 있는지 그거를 한번 참고를 하고 또 지금 들어온 이 제품의 사용 목적을 달성하는 주작용 원리가 그게 양리학인 건지 아니면 화학적인 건지 아니면 물리적인 건지 기계적인 건지 이런 것들에 따라서 분류를 하고 있고 그다음에 이 제품의 안전성이나 유효성에 중대한 영향을 미치는 요인이 뭐가 있는지 이런 것들을 판단을 해서 주작용을 분류를 하고 있습니다. 이렇게 3가지가 있기는 한데 주로 이제 저희 경험상 보면은 이 첫 번째 있는 기 분류 사례라든지 아니면은 작용 원리 이 2가지를 주로 해서 분류를 하고 있습니다. 다음은 이제 올 한 해 동안 분류한 분류 사례에 대해서 이제 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 융복합 의료 제품 분류는 2019년부터 이루어지고 있었는데요. 올해 9월까지 634건의 제품 분류가 있었고 그중에 이제 융복합은 약 24%로 판단이 되었습니다. 그 판단된 융복합 의료 제품의 주작용을 봤더니 약 70%가 주작용의 의료기기였고 나머지 30%는 의약품 쪽의 분류로 나타났습니다. 그 융복합 의료제품의 결합 형태를 보면 의료기기와 의약품이 주로 많이 결합된 형태로 분류가 되었고, 그 다음이 이제 의료기기와 의약외품으로 분류되는 순이었습니다. 융복합 의료제품 이제 올 한 해 동안 했던 것 중에 분류 사례를 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 이번 분류 사례는 앞에서 설명드렸던 그 융복합 의료제품의 형태에 따라서 한번 분류를 해봤습니다. 우선 이제 단일체 형태였을 경우에 융복합 의료제품이 어떻게 분류되었는지 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 이식혁 침장 충격기에 연결하는 이제 전극인데 그 전극 말단에 염증 감소 약물이 이제 도포된 경우가 있었습니다. 이런 경우에는 이제 전극이 주작으로 봐서 주작용이 의료기기이고 보조작용이 의약품인 이런 분류 사례가 있었습니다. 다음은 이제 안면부 주름 개선을 목적으로 흡수성 재질의 안면 조직 고정용 실에 세포재생 촉진이라든지 함영증 작용을 위한 성분이 코팅한 제품이 있었는데 이것은 이제 안면 조직 고정용 실이 더 주작용이라고 봐서 주작용이 의료기기이고 보조작용이 의약품인 분류 사례가 있었습니다. 다음은 이제 손상된 뼈, 인대, 건, 근육, 연골들을 보충하기 위해서 사용하는 콜라겐 함유 물질에 지혈 및 통증 감소를 위한 보조 성분이 함유된 제품이 있었는데 요거는 이제 콜라겐 사용 조직 보충제가 주작용인 의료기기인 것으로 판단을 했고 보조작용은 의약품으로 판단을 했습니다. 그 다음 제품은 치주준환으로 인해서 이완된 치주낭에 이제 주입해 물리적 장벽으로 조직 재생을 유도하는 성분과 치주조직 재생에 적합한 환경 조성을 위한 성분이 첨가된 그런 흡수성 재료였는데 이것은 조직 재생을 유도하는 물리적 장벽을 형성해서 조직 재생을 유도하는 성분이 주로 받기 때문에 의료기기가 주작용이고 보조작용이 의약품인 것으로 판단을 했습니다. 조직 수복력 생체 재료였는데요. 이거는 이제 관절경 수술 후에 관절 부위내에 존재하는 잔류성 세정액을 제거하고 소실된 활액을 임시로 이제 대체하기 위해서 기계적인 마찰을 줄이기 위한 성분에다가 감염 예방을 위한 성분이 이제 첨가된 그런 제품이 있었습니다. 요거는 그래서 기계적인 마찰을 줄이기 위한 이 성분이 추가되었다고 보기 때문에 의료기기가 주작용이고 보조작용이 의약품인 것으로 판단을 했습니다. 다음은 이제 외과 수술 시에 1차 지혈 후에 체내 조직의 삼출성 출혈을 지혈하기 위해서 흡수성 체내 지혈용품으로 이제 혈액을 흡수 응집해서 물리적으로 지혈을 한 후에 유전자 재주합 지혈 효소가 그 보조 지혈을 하는 역할의 제품이 있었습니다. 요거는 주작용이 의료기기고 보조작용이 생물의약품인 이런 사례가 있었습니다. 이거는 이제 주사침이 포함된 멸균 주사침이 포함된 관절염 치료약이 담긴 프리필드 실린지인데요. 이거는 이제 많이들 보셔서 아시겠지만 주작용이 의약품이고 보조작용이 의료기기인 그런 제품이었습니다. 구강점막 국소 마취용 하이드로겔 패치인데요. 이거는 이제 구강점막 국소 마취용 하이드로겔 패치인데 구강점막의 표면 마취로 통증을 경감시키는 것과 그 다음에 물리적 막을 형성해서 상처 보호 및 수분을 하는 이런 제품이었습니다. 요 제품 같은 경우에는 국소 마취를 하는 의약품이 더 주작용으로 봤기 때문에 주작용이 의약품이고 보조작용이 의료기기인 것으로 판단을 했습니다. 이렇게 보면은 지금 이 단일체에서 어떻게 보면 이런 하이드로겔 패치 아니면은 조직 수복용 생체 재료 흡수성 체내형 지혈용품 같은 경우에는 이렇게 우리가 패치라든지 뭐 지혈용품 아니면 조직 수복용 생체 재료는 의료기기가 주작용이 대부분이 많기는 한데 요 첨가되는 보조 성분이 어떤 거냐 아니면은 그 성분의 농도라든지 양이 어떤 거냐에 따라서 이게 이제 주작용이 의료기기도 될 수 있지만 의약품이 될 수 있다는 거는 알아두셨으면 좋겠습니다. 그래서 모든 제품이 이런 유형의 제품은 다 이런 게 주작용이다라고 말할 수 없는 게 융복합 의료제품의 특징인 것 같습니다. 그러니까 사안별로 그 건건이 어떤 사용 목적인지 어떤 제품의 성분을 가지고 어떤 작용 원리로 되는지를 봐야 되는 것 같습니다. 다음은 하포장 형태의 융복합 의료제품을 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 상처 보호 및 건조를 방지하기 위해 이제 국서 폼제, 창상 피복제와 의료용 핀셋, 의약외품인 거즈 등이 구성된 이런 제품이었는데, 요거는 이제 주작용이 의료기기이고 보조작용이 의약외품인 그런 사례가 있었습니다. 다음은 수액 세트인데요. 이제 카테터를 연결하는 수액 세트하고 고정형 방창고로 구성된 제품으로, 이건 주작용이 의료기기이고 보조작용이 의약외품인 그런 형태였습니다. 체외형 의료용 전극 반창고 센트였는데요. 인체 신호를 감지하는 체외형 전극에다가 고정형 반창고로 구성된 제품으로, 이건 주작용이 의료기기이고 보조작용이 의약외품인 그런 사례가 있었습니다. 다음은 흡입용 튜브 카테터 키트로 배행용 기구와의 거리가 멀 때 중간에 연결해주는 그런 흡입용 튜브 카테터와 해당 의료기기를 단순히 이제 접착력만으로 고정하는 이런 반창고를 하나로 구성한 제품이었는데, 주작용이 의료기기이고 보조작용이 의약외품이었습니다. 다음은 치료 약물과 전용 초음파 흡입기 세트인데, 폐고혈압 환자의 치료를 위해서 이제 의약품과 이 약물을 액체 상태에서 기체 상태로 폐에 전달하기 위한 전용 초음파 흡입기로 구성된 제품이었는데요. 요거는 이제 주작용이 의약품이고 보조작용인 의료기기였습니다. 다음은 의약품과 수동식 의약품 혼합용 기구 키트인데, 환자에게 투여할 의약품을 이제 제조 시에 의약품 혼합 등에 사용하는 이런 수동식 기구와 의약품으로 구성된 제품으로, 주작용은 의약품이고 보조작용은 의료기기였습니다. 다음은 이제 분류 신청한 건들 중에 융복합이 아니었던 사례에 대해서 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 보통 이제 프리필드 실린지 같은 경우에는 융복합 제품이라고 알고 계시는데, 주사침이 포함되지 않는 경우에 단순히 그거를 어떤 약물을 담고 있는 용기로서만 그 프리필드 실린지가 그 역할을 한다면은, 그런 거는 융복합 의료 제품이 아닌 것으로 판단을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 생물의약품이 포함되어 있고 그 주입을 위한 이제 실린지 조합의 제품이었는데, 이거는 이제 단순히 그 용액을 담고 있는 용기로 봤기 때문에 이거는 생물의약품으로 판단을 하였습니다. 앞에 이제 합포장인 융복합 의료 제품과 비슷한 유형의 제품이 두 번째 건데요. 의약품과 의약품 소분을 위한 기구 결합의 제품이 있습니다. 앞에서는 의약품을 섞기 위해서 하는 그런 제품이었기 때문에 그거를 의료기기로 봤는데, 단순히 의약품을 이제 소분해서 담는 용기로 사용하는 경우에는 이걸 의료기기로 보지 않기 때문에, 이러한 제품은 융복합 의료 제품이 아닌 의약품으로 분류를 하였습니다. 다음은 의약품과 화장품을 조합한 제품입니다. 앞서 설명드렸다시피 융복합 의료 제품의 정의를 보면 의약품, 의약외품, 의료기기가 이제 서로 복합된 제품이기 때문에 그 정의에 화장품은 들어가 있지 않습니다. 그래서 의약품과 화장품을 조합한 제품은 융복합 의료 제품으로 보고 있지 않습니다. 다음은 이제 보습력 보강을 위해서 성분이 결합된 창상 피복제 제품인데, 단순히 보습력을 보강하는 그런 제품은 의약품의 역할로 볼 수가 없기 때문에 요거는 융복합 의료 제품이 아닌 의료기기로 분류를 하였습니다. 다섯 번째는 통증 및 가려움 감소를 위한 약물이 이제 함유된 창상 피복제였는데요. 이거는 이제 첨가된 의약품 성분에 의한 통증 및 가려움 감소가 피부 상처 관리에 결정적인 역할을 하는 것으로 판단을 해서 융복합 의료 제품이 아닌 의약품으로 그렇게 판단을 했습니다. 보통 창상 피복제에 저런 이제 가려움 감소하는 의약품 약물이 포함된 경우에는 주작용이 의료기기이고 보조작용이 의약품인 뭐 이런 제품으로 많이 분류가 되는데, 이 경우에는 저기 이제 첨가된 의약품 성분의 양이라든지 아니면 농도, 그 성분에 따라서 요거를 판단을 했기 때문에 융복합 의료 제품이 아니고 단순히 의약품인 것으로 그렇게 판단을 했습니다. 다음은 골관절염 치료에 의약품 성분이 이제 포함된 조직 수복용 생체 제로입니다. 관절광에 주입해서 물리적 수복을 통해서 관절 부위의 기계적 마찰을 줄여주고 염증을 감소해주는 그런 제품이 이제 조직 수복용 생체의 재료가 되겠는데요. 이 제품 같은 경우에는 제품에 사용하는 어떤 이제 성분이 있었는데, 그 성분이 골관절염 치료에 사용되는 의약품이었고, 그 다음에 여기서 이제 조직 수복용 생체 재료로 젤라틴이라는 것을 이용했는데, 이 젤라틴은 의료기기라기보다는 의약품의 이제 첨가제로 사용되는 성분으로 이렇게 판단을 해서 이건 융복합 의료 제품이 아닌 의약품으로 그렇게 판단을 했습니다. 이것도 이제 마찬가지로 저 골관절염 치료에 사용되는 의약품 성분이 이제 포함되어 있었기 때문에 그것을 이제 더 주로 받고, 그다음에 젤라틴은 그 조직 순복용 생체 재료에 많이 쓰이긴 하지만 그것 때문에 융복합으로 보기보다는 하나의 의약품으로 이렇게 판단을 해서 관리를 하는 것이 낫다라고 그렇게 생각을 했습니다. 이제 마지막으로 보면은 융복합 개공기구, 의료용 개공기구와 반창고 합포장 제품입니다. 개공기구라고 하면은 어떤 것을 이렇게 열어주는 그런 의료기기인데, 그런 의료기기의 상처 부위의 보호를 위해 사용되는 이제 반창고 의약 외품이 이제 합포장된 경우인데, 요거 같은 경우에는 이렇게 열어주는 기계에 상처를 보호를 위해 이제 사용하는 그 반창고는 하나의 사용 목적에 좀 부합되지 않는다고 판단을 했기 때문에 융복합 의료 제품이 아니고 각각 개별 허가를 받아서 사용하는 것이 좋을 것 같다라고 그렇게 판단을 한 사례가 있습니다. 이거는 이제 같은 사용 목적으로 봤을 때 어떤 형태냐에 따라서 어떤 거는 융복합 의료 제품이 될 수 있고 어떤 건 아니고, 이런 예제들을 좀 모아봤는데요. 마이크로 니들 같은 경우에 오른쪽에 보시면은 저희가 이 약물하고 마이크로 니들 성분 만들 수 있는 거를 이제 혼합해서 사용하는 경우에는 요거는 이제 융복합 의료 제품보다는 의약품 쪽으로 몰아서 관리를 하는 게 있고, 그다음에 코팅형 제품하고 저렇게 분리형 제품 같은 경우에는 융복합 의료 제품인데 주작용이 의약품인 것으로 그렇게 하고 있습니다. 또 여기서 하나 더 보실 수 있는 것은 앞에서 형태에 따라서 융복합 의료 제품을 분류를 했는데, 코팅형 같은 경우에는 일체형이 될 수가 있을 거고, 분리형 같은 경우에는 합포장 의료 제품이라고 볼 수 있겠습니다. 질 세정기 같은 경우에도 이제 어떤 성분이 들어가 있느냐, 그다음에 사용 목적이 어떻게 조금 다른가에 따라서 융복합 의료 제품이냐 아니면 의료기기냐 이렇게 될 수가 있는데, 그 성분을 봤을 때는 여기 세정액이 정제수만으로 돼 있을 경우에는 그거는 이제 단순히 의료기기로 분류를 하고 있고, 세정액에 정제수 외에 이제 다른 성분이 들어가서 이거는 세척만을 목적으로 한다라고 그럴 경우엔 융복합 의료기기이면서 주작용이 의료기기인 것으로 그렇게 판단을 하고 있습니다. 하지만 세척 외에 살균이라든지 방치 이런 목적이 들어간다고 한다면 융복합 의료 제품은 맞지만 주작용이 의약품인 것으로 그렇게 판단을 하고 있습니다. 마지막으로 코어 세정기도 보면은 이제 세정기도 어떤 형태냐에 따라서 또 이렇게 분류가 달라지고 있습니다. 여기도 성분이 단순히 염화나트륨 용액만 있을 경우에는 그것은 의료기기로 보고 있지만, 이 염화나트륨 용액 외에 다른 또 성분이 들어간 경우에는 그거는 융복합 의료 제품으로서 주작용이 의료기기인 것으로 그렇게 판단을 하고 있습니다. 그러니까 융복합 의료 제품을 분류를 할 때는 그게 어떤 성분이 들어있는지, 그리고 사용 목적이 어떤 건지, 용량이 어떻게 되는지 이런 것들도, 그다음에 어떤 작용으로 그 사용 목적을 달성하는지 이런 것들이 중요하게 분류하는데 이루어지고 있다고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 저희 첨단제품허가담당관실에서는 그 융복합 의료제품의 분류 사례를 매년 하고 있지만, 이 분류 사례에 대한 책자를 2년에 한 번씩 발간을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 그런 책자들을 참고를 하시려면 식약처 홈페이지에 들어가셔서 법령자료 안에 공무원 지침서라든지 일반 홍보란에 들어가셔서 클릭을 하시면 관련 자료들을 보실 수 있습니다. 그리고 그 분류 사례 외에 저희 과에서 이제 융복합 의료제품 관련해서 다른 참고 자료들도 많이 발간한 것이 있으니까 참고하시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 이상으로 발표를 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Good morning, everyone. Is that better? Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and privilege to stand before you and share with you what I have gathered over my journey in combination product. Before I jump into the topic today, I'm going to focus a lot on global trends, but I'm going to use an example. The reason I will use an example is because when you hear a story and the story has a profound impact, you tend to think about things very differently. So, my disclaimer, I do not represent any organization. I'm not here to represent Amgen. I'm here to represent myself as an industry leader who's been doing combination product-related safety work and risk management work almost about 18 years now. I've started working in this industry way before it was called combination product. I have highlighted here that I'm part of a group called CPC, Combination Product Coalition. It's an industry group where diverse companies come together, and I am the chair for their coalition's post-market safety reporting. Again, examples that I will be using are hypothetical or publicly available information. While I'll be talking about the evolving global environment, I'll focus on some of the key challenges. And I'm very happy the presenter before me walked us through the different scenarios and the complexity. So it's not black and white, it's not simple. Yet, as we grow the portfolio of combination products globally, we are going to have to align in some form. That way, it becomes easy for industry and for the regulators to regulate these products. What I have highlighted here for you are those countries that acknowledge the concept of combination product. Most of these countries, in principle, have a flavor of a drug, device, biologic, either 2 or 3 of those coming together be labeled as combination product. As you can see, one of the latest countries to enhance that was Malaysia. But most of these countries, while they have requirements explicitly called out, there are subtle differences in each of them. So let's take US, for example. US is the only country where a drug and a biologic, when combined, are classified as combination product. All other geographies consider that combination either as a drug or a biologic, depending upon the primary mode of action. What I have highlighted here for you are at least 4 of the geographies that have the most mature combination product requirements. I have highlighted the definitions for you. I've also included the links for you to be able to go explore. Even as you look at the definitions here, you can tell there are subtle nuances that make aligning and complying a little difficult. So let's say I'm a company that has requirements and products around the globe. From a safety perspective, I have to ensure I have a team in place that understands the global requirements, the specific local requirements, the timeline specifically, and are able to implement in a timely manner so we don't end up non-compliant. You just heard in extensive detail that South Korea already has very established approach to combination product. I will not go through the discussion, but basically combination products driven by primary mode of action are either classified as a drug or a device. I told you I would walk you through an example. How many of you here are members of the safety organization? Can I have a raise of hand, please? Anybody from safety? Okay, a few. How many of you are from quality? Okay. How many from regulatory affairs? Okay. As expected, majority of you represent regulatory affairs. What I'm going to share with you is a story that you may want to take back and discuss with your safety and your quality colleagues. So, how many of you are aware of a disease called Parkinson's disease? Just in general. Okay. So Parkinson's disease is a disease, neurological disease, where a patient has extreme rigidity and tremors. There is predominantly one therapy that's been used for years. It's levodopa-carbidopa. Patients that have Parkinson's disease have a mental condition that makes them suicidal. They are usually depressed. The disease inherently has other side effects where the patient feels depressed. Obviously, they are not able to function the way they used to prior to being diagnosed. Levodopa-carbidopa, when administered, also has enhanced side effects of suicidality, depression, and suicidal ideation. So you have the disease state and the therapy, both potentially leading to a depressed mental state and ideas of committing suicide. The therapy in its earliest form was pills. Depending upon how advanced the disease was, you were prescribed a certain dose of pills. The patient would take them. As the pills were working, they would have less rigidity, they were functioning. The minute the pills got emptied out of the stomach, it's called a phenomenon, gastric emptying, the patient froze. Whatever state they were in, they could freeze. They could be driving a car and they could freeze. So there's a company out there that decided to use a PEG J tube. A PEG J tube is simply a tube that is directly inserted into your jejunum, into your small intestine, and it's usually commonly a simple device for patients who are bedridden, who are either in a coma or have had a stroke, to deliver food. This company decided to use a pump that delivers levodopa-carbidopa in combination with a PEG J tube to deliver levodopa gel directly into the intestine in a pulsatile manner over 16 hours. So we had examples of people who had sold their farms, who had given up their careers and were bedridden because of Parkinson's. Now with this therapy, they were farming. I have an example of someone who climbed Mount Everest once they got that pump and the PEG J. The pump and the PEG J are a classical example of a combination product where the pump had cassettes with levodopa-carbidopa, and it had a delivery system with the PEG J. As a safety person who worked on that product in my past life, I had not imagined someone going to Mount Everest with my pump. The manufacturer of the PEG J had not imagined that someone would be farming using a PEG J. So what was happening? people were accidentally pulling out the PEG-J. So if your population was a bedridden population, that was the indication for use for that simple PEG-J tube. You now had them inserted in fully functional adults. In addition, these individuals were now eating food with fiber, and they were forming bezoars. Again, the PEG-J manufacturer had no idea that their safety profile and risk profile would change so dramatically. Fast forward, I can never forget the day we got notified of our first completed suicide, where the patient that we had now enabled had used the same tubing to complete their suicide. I want to pause for a second, because if you can imagine a simple therapy that was enabling patients now were capable to complete their suicidal ideation. The reason I bring this to all of you is there is a need for us to think of products, especially combination products, more holistically. What are the potential opportunities when you are thinking of risk management, impact to patient safety, efficacy, and effectiveness? It's very rare you see such a dramatic change in risk profile of a product. But I urge all of you to go back and make sure your team members think of your product more holistically. We did go back and update the risk profile. Granted, completed suicides were very few, yet you can imagine our shock when we had to go through that exercise. I hope this draws the message I'm trying to bring forward. When you are working with combination product, you need to not think of it as a drug, a biologic, or a delivery system only. What's critical is the interaction between the different constituent parts. How does your risk profile of the product change? When you are talking to the individuals within your organizations, are they thinking about the worst case scenario that's reasonably likely to occur? I don't expect everyone using the levodopa-carbidopa pump to climb Mount Everest. But I did need to know what's the impact on the viscosity at an altitude. So make sure your teams think more holistically. What I have here are direct extracts from the regulations from FDA. So depending upon what combination you have of a drug, a device, and a biologic, these are the regulatory reporting requirements that are needed for you to comply with in order to demonstrate compliance. So at the bottom of the screen, what you see is just within the US. By the end of 2027, the combination product industry is expected to touch $214 billion. This is not a forum where we usually talk about money. The reason I bring this forward is when you go back to your organizations and want to emphasize why a shift culturally has to happen, you need to show them why. The product portfolio mix is going to significantly grow in the combination product space. For those of us who've been in industry for a long time, you know we started our journey with simple pills, vials, to pre-filled syringes, to auto-injectors, to on-body injectors. Now we have cells delivering drugs to targeted organs. We now are talking about remotely manipulating DNA that's delivered by cells. It's getting more and more complex. From a current GMP requirements from the US. So US came out with 2 specific combination product regulations. 21 CFR Part 4A that focuses on CGMP requirements, and Part B that focuses on safety. I explicitly brought this forward because FDA has clearly articulated their expectation is for any organization that has combination product in their portfolio to demonstrate compliance to CGMP requirements for both drugs and devices. The options given are either you comply with everything for both the requirements, or, as you can see, you need to comply if you are a primary drug, a primary mode of action drug or biologic, you follow the QMS requirements for that, plus incorporate certain called out specific requirements. So they explicitly called out what you needed to comply with. So please make sure you understand, even though the terminologies might be the same, I want to emphasize, for example, management review. The word management review means the same thing to the drug side and the device, but they have very explicit requirements on the device side. So make sure your organization understands the unique requirements. Some of the challenges that we face today are related to a company or an organization that originally was a drug or a biologic company, and by default, because they have drug delivery systems, has now evolved into a combination product organization. In these companies, there is a strong barrier between the different functions. So quality and safety sit in very different organizations. They usually have different leadership. They come together during cross-functional interactions, but it's very limited. The challenge with that is you absolutely need both sides to understand everything that was reported in a complaint, in an adverse event, in a serious injury, or a serious, non-serious injury related to the device. Without active engagement between the two teams, it is hard, because in these organizations, product complaints are managed by quality, and safety or adverse event reporting is managed by pharmacovigilance or patient safety. The teams do talk, but it's limited. And where it becomes a problem is the need to constantly reconcile data across both the systems and applications in order to tell the whole story. Because oftentimes, your product complaints and adverse events may not even be related. So let's say someone calls in, they have used a pre-filled syringe or an auto-injector, and they call in with a headache. The headache is a side effect of the drug, but they also say that it was a painful injection. The painful injection potentially is because of your device, but it could also be because of your drug. Maybe it has citrate in it. It is very important for the teams to understand the definitions and how to triage an adverse event, a product complaint, and in certain cases, an event that could be both. Let's say a death occurs. You don't know if it happened because of the device or the drug. Unless you have explicit details, you have to consider, could the device have caused or contributed to death? So here are some of the challenges that I have highlighted. I do think it's valuable for you to spend some time with your safety team and exchange with them this list more as a checklist to make sure they are able to go through this and identify if there are any opportunities to further enhance the process. The most important part is having a risk-based approach to everything that is conducted in the combination product world. The reason I say that is it's a combination of high volume adverse event data and a high in-depth investigation that comes with the device. You need to find the right balance from a risk level to make sure you're giving the right attention to high-risk activities while you are either trending or monitoring the low-risk activities appropriately. Some of the challenges that I want you to really understand from a uniqueness in the US are similar device reporting, and also please be aware when you are having global inspections and audits, you may get either device inspectors or drug inspectors that may be using terminology that you may want to make yourself abreast with. Some of the biggest challenges come with, as I mentioned, the organizational setup. Make sure you have the right talent that understands the drug side and the device side. They understand the regulatory framework of both sides and invest time to train on the opposite. Because without that kind of training, it's hard for people to align on the terminology that's being used. There is a very unique requirement from an FDA perspective for cross-labeled product. It's called information sharing. Explicitly related to purely cross-labeled products, you are obligated to share any serious adverse events or serious injuries with the other manufacturer within 5 calendar days. So please make sure it's a one-time exchange, but make sure your team understands that requirement. What is the biggest change that's needed for us to be combination product ready? It's the culture. It's the mindset shift. I have heard often, we're just a drug biologic company. Devices are a secondary thought. Or, I'm just a device company, drugs are a secondary thought. Please make sure, while that could be true, from a portfolio point of view, you are still liable for complying with the opposite requirements. People, process, and technology. Invest in automating as much as possible your combination product safety reporting, especially triaging, coding, and ensuring that you have a global framework to meet the variability in the different geographies. Some of the industry best practices that I called out here, please make sure you as regulatory affairs partner very closely with safety and quality. Make sure the teams are aware of the evolving regulatory requirements, because I'll show you from a reporting perspective, right now, if you, depending on a drug device or biologic combination, you have anywhere from a 3-day reporting, 5-day reporting, 15-day reporting, 30-day reporting, 45-day reporting. So in order to comply with those different requirements, you need to understand the relevance. And I'm just talking US. So the more you get into other geographies, you have different timeframes to comply with. I want to draw your attention to please ensure the agreements, partnerships, and co-developments are set up very robustly and refreshed to comply with combination product requirements. I know that is a blind spot, and we often get caught off guard during audits and inspections. The one concept that is very unique to device reporting from an FDA perspective is malfunction-only reporting. So from a safety for drugs and biologics, you are aware that you need to have a patient, a product, an injury. So there are a multitude of factors that have to happen for you to have a reportable event. That's not true from a device perspective. From a device perspective, if you have a device malfunction, that is likely to cause death or serious injury. So it has not caused death or serious injury, but is likely. If it was to happen inside the anatomy, it could have caused an injury, and it luckily happened outside the anatomy. That is a reportable malfunction. It's hard for safety teams to think of it that way, especially if it is pharmacovigilance. So please help them understand the unique requirement. Here's where I call out the different dates. I have included the link to the guidance document. It explicitly tells you which of these are calendar days, business days. Make sure you understand what's your awareness day or day 0, and follow the requirements explicitly called out. Another blind spot, clinical trials. Many of us do not already think of clinical trials as a place to gather extensive combination product information. Please go back and think of it. Not just early stages, but also phase 4 studies. One of our biggest challenges right now is EU MDR compliance. In an ideal world, we would want cross-functional teams to work together to deliver a holistic report. My key takeaways for you today: if you have a product that has been approved maybe 50 years ago, but it has a drug, biologic, and/or a device, it is by default now a combination product. Culture is the biggest change that has to happen. A risk-based approach to post-market safety reporting is the best approach in order for you to stay compliant and make it defendable. Upfront information gathering on both the device and the drug is key to make sure you stay compliant. PMSR impacts all our processes, and ultimately, cross-functional collaboration is key to success of combination product. With that, thank you.
Hi, my name is Rumi Young, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Policy at Becton Dickinson. Thank you for having me here today to speak at the 2023 MFDS Combination Products Conference. Today, I will be giving a presentation on global regulatory policies impacting combination products. So before I begin my presentation, I want to give an overview of my own career journey in combination products. So to begin, I worked in a pharmaceutical company where, as a device development engineer, I learned about monoclonal antibodies and vaccines, primary containers and device constituents needed to deliver said drugs to patients. Then at FDA, I joined in the Division of Drug Delivery, General Hospital and Human Factors, where I assumed many roles as a reviewer, a team leader, and then finally the Assistant Director for Injection Devices, where I set the technical and regulatory expectations for all of these devices shown on this slide. These can be standalone syringes and needles, all the way to more complex electronic on-body injectors in smart connected devices. And now today at Becton Dickinson, I lead the regulatory policy team, understanding U.S. and international harmonization policies for medical devices, IVDs, and combination products. So let's look at the combination product evolution. To begin, they were simple drug delivery devices in order to add convenience. So rather than just a vial, you can have a vial co-packaged with a syringe or syringe and needle, right? This improved the accessibility of the products and sometimes customization needed to administer the drug to the appropriate route. Then we found by creating more single entity products like pre-filled syringes, auto injectors, pen injectors, we were able to bring these therapies from the hospital to the home. And thus, first having evidence of where combination products can maximize the safety and or effectiveness of these therapies for patients. Now I am thinking we are in a digital era. And this is where we are seeing more and more that the device constituent is not a mechanical component, but it can be a software as a medical device. It can be an algorithm that can be used to inform medication management and delivery. This is where we are seeing the device constituent part of the combination product getting much more attention from our health authorities as they are taking a deeper look in the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning for multiple applications, but more specifically for combination products in the use of drug delivery management and allow for precision medicine. So combination products are probably one of the most complex healthcare product to understand, develop, and regulate because you have to understand multiple regulatory frameworks. Because you have multiple constituents, a device constituent, a drug constituent, a vaccine, and even in some jurisdictions, a more consumer type product like mouth rinse, toothpaste, insecticide, you need to follow more than one framework in a streamlined way. What also creates additional complexity is looking at it globally. Many companies are not just marketing in one region, they're marketing in multiple regions, each of which may have a different definition for combination product and expectations of how to manage those multiple frameworks. And so this currently in my role, I'm constantly scanning and evaluating what are the emerging trends in medical devices and drugs, and how does that influence combination product, and understanding whether these new policies foster innovation in this space, or do they add additional administrative burden that would delay access of these products to patients. So for the remainder of my presentation, I'll give an overview of emerging regulatory policies across the globe that impact combination products and a discussion of whether that is a benefit, an opportunity, or we may have to spend more time as developers navigating the appropriate expectations to ensure patient safety. So let's start with the US region. So once every 5 years, the US goes through an exercise called user fees, where industry and FDA meet to discuss what are the fees associated with certain applications and deadlines for reviewing said applications. At the same time, they come together and decide, are there any necessary regulatory reforms needed? Well, at the end of last year, one of such reforms, called platform technologies, was passed into law. Now, if you look at the right of the slide, you can see the definition for this. This is understood as a well-understood reproducible technology, which may include a delivery method which to me sounds like a device constituent, and with 3 caveats: is incorporated in or utilized by a drug or biologic product, it can be used by more than one product, and facilitates in the manufacture and development of more than one drug or biologic product. Based on this definition, the device constituent part, say, such as a glass prefillable syringe, could be seen as a platform technology and benefit from some of the opportunities the legislation provides, such as the ability to leverage data for platform products from one file to the other, expedited development and review, and early interactions with the agency, which will improve efficiency, not just at the agency level, but at the industry level. Now, I believe this is a very important provision that can allow for the acceleration of certain critical products to patients and reduce redundant reviews on the FDA end and on the industry end. Now, the details of such program will be released in a guidance by the end of 2023. Another new emerging U.S. policy would be essential performance requirements. To date, the agency has not written any legislation, regulation, or guidance on what essential performance requirements are. However, industry has been seeing them in interactions with the agency informally in conferences or meetings, or formally in deficiencies regarding submissions since around 2017. Now, what are they based on the information we do know? EPRs are often noted in verification plans and in clinical validation of combination products. They're often referred to as being notable in the control strategy, as are these features such as deliver dose and activation device being tested on release, or if not, how are there adequate controls upstream to ensure the performance of said functions? Now, this term is often equated to other terms for combination products, such as primary function, as seen in ISO 11608-1, or established conditions, or critical quality attributes that we often see in ICH. However, one distinct difference is EPRs are often used to address regulatory questions and when comparing. So, for example, if you are a manufacturer that is bridging from a glass prefillable syringe to an auto-injector, EPRs often come into the conversation when comparing those two formats. Similarly, we also see them present when discussing the differences between the originator and the biosimilar or generic product. Finally, they're also been used when addressing post-market changes. For example, has the following design or manufacturing change impacted the essential performance requirements of your drug delivery combination products? Now, there has, again, nothing been released to date, but we are expecting something to finally come out in 2024 after a push to have guidance drafted and released. Now, just as early as a few weeks ago, 2 other important guidances were released by the US FDA. The first one being the application of human factors engineering principles for combination products question and answers, and the second, regulatory consideration for prescription drug use related software. So for the first one, this was very impactful because not only did it clarify the definition of critical task for combination products, it also stated that such definition, which is more robust than the standalone medical device critical task definition, applies not only to drug-led combination products, but also device-led combination products. This will change how summative evaluation studies are designed and the subsequent analysis. For the second guidance, this was also very impactful because, again, it was a signal that the agency is looking at the applications, like mobile applications and tools that drug manufacturers or other developers are using, partnering with their drug delivery device. So, for example, if you had an auto-injector that signaled to an application when the medication was delivered, this guidance would apply. and provides guidance on how drug labeling authorities apply to these mobile apps. So if they're device connected, you need to ensure how this information will be described in the prescribing information or in promotional labeling. Now, shifting gears to the EU, there's also been activity here. In April 2023, the EU Commission issued a proposed EU pharma legislation with a promise that it would increase access to medicine and reducing the administrative burden leading to faster authorizations. Taking a closer look, while a lot of discussion was based on the drug pricing aspect, there were also some changes that impacted combination products foundationally, such as definitions. Looking at the directive, we were given two definitions for combination products. One, integral combination products. This is akin to a single entity combination product. So take, for example, a glass prefillable syringe filled with a biologic. That would be considered an integral combination product. The second term they've introduced is a medicinal products used exclusively with a medical device. This is also very similar to a co-packaged combination product, where you may have a vial co-packaged with a syringe and needle. These are exclusive use because they're co-packaged together. That being said, the directive also clarifies that you would need notified body opinion showing conformance to GSPR for the integral and all of MDR for the exclusive use combination product. All of this information would then be submitted as part to the EMA as part of the drug application for the combination product, where they would then perform a holistic review of the final product. Now, that last portion is very critical because when assessing combination products, they do need to be looked at holistically because you need to be aware of whether or not the drug is influencing the device performance and vice versa, which could have an impact on the safety and effectiveness of the combination product. This is not indicating a standalone registration approach, because that would not be impactful to understanding the final finished combination product performance as it relates to the patient end. Finally, in the regulation, we get more detail on certain tools that will be available, such as the EMA providing expert scientific advice in parallel with expert panels for EU MDR. And there's also the opportunity to use regulatory sandboxes for artificial intelligence. That is very powerful for combination products, as AI can be used to help determine the appropriate dose for the specific patient, allowing for precision medicine. Now, this change is going to come quickly. There still needs to be a lot of discussions about the nuances of this, but it definitely is a step forward in defining a combination product, and we should expect to see something in 2025 and 2026. We need to also discuss the emerging changes in Greater Asia with respect to combination products, because the three health authorities here have made changes in recent years to make room for this product, again, seeing the value that they can bring to patients. So let's start with Japan, PMDA. You know, in recent years, they released a guidance describing their definition for combination product. Now, just to summarize, they named three main types of combination products: single entity, co-packaged, and cross-labeled. This definition is the closest to the US FDA definition globally. However, they also add two other specific terms: combination drugs and combination devices, that also refer to separate guidelines with different expectations. For example, a combination drug is a product in which marketed drugs, medical devices, or cellular or tissue-based products are sold together by distributors. That is seen distinct as separate from combination products. Moving on to NMPA, where in 2018, they have rebranded to NMPA, and then subsequently in the spring of 2021 and summer of 2021, they released their own guidance with definitions of what they believe is a combination product. Now, to summarize, their definition is limited to single entity combination product, with the caveat that pre-fillable syringe systems, such as a pre-filled syringe, an auto-injector, or a pen, are not combination products and instead are drugs, unless otherwise specified. While that last part seems like there's some ambiguity in this space, I believe they're leaving the room open so that they can understand these products and regulate appropriately based on the clinical risk benefit that is coming to review. Moving on to MFDS, they also have their own definition of combination product, which is very similar to PMDA, which includes single entity and co-packaged. The difference is they have a new term, a new constituent part, in addition to drugs and devices, called quasi-drugs. Now, quasi-drugs come in three main categories. The first one, very similar to what a consumer good would be, such as toothpaste, mouth rinse, hair dye. The other category are synthetic fibers or rubbers that would be used, for example, bandages, Band-Aids, masks. And the last one are antiseptics and insecticides. You know, that is very interesting as they're looking more broadly of what can comprise a combination product and different constituent parts. There was also some changes going back to NMPA with the release of a human factors guidance. While not specific to combination products, it does highlight the need for strong human factors evaluation for drug device combination products. Again, they're understanding that the introduction of a device constituent can change the use of the drug in an environment, change the environment itself from hospital to home. Thus, additional scrutiny is needed for those human factors evaluations. Now, as we can see, for all three of these regulators, they are taking a look at combination products and determining the best way to regulate them for their region. However, all of them do follow a primary mode of action approach that determines a lead center for regulatory review decision-making, and they do try to attempt to synchronize the reviews when a consulting center is needed to render a decision. But what it shows is that combination products will continue to grow, not just in this region, but across the globe. And it also highlights the importance of definitions and processes. On the right, I try to illustrate the importance of that. As a regulator, I was taught that it always starts with the regulatory identity of a product. What is it? Is it a drug? Is it a device? Is it a combination product? Is it a software as a medical device? Is it a product under enforcement discretion? All of these definitions are very critical because then that tells you what regulatory pathway you need to follow, or the center, like who's your audience that you need to address the question of safety and effectiveness. Moving there, that then tells you the submission expectations. What guidances do I need to follow? What standards do I need to follow? Do I need clinical data for one center and I don't need it necessarily for another because that's not allowed because of the regulatory pathway? And then finally, when you accumulate all of the clinical and non-clinical data needed, that gives you an indication of entry to market. So again, it goes back to the criticality of combination product definitions that drive the regulatory strategy and ultimate development of these products in regions. So let's take a little bit step back to look at how regulators are talking with one another in efforts to harmonize. After the COVID-19 pandemic, regulators decided to start speaking to each other more because they found that in this era, there were medical device shortages and drug shortages, and they needed to speak the same language in order to allow for regulatory reliance. This is where one region can rely on the approval or clearances of another region, thus allowing the entry of critical medical devices or drugs to their patients. Now, there are a few forums out there that currently allow regulators to speak with one another and sometimes release best practices and guidelines. So Starting with drugs, we have ICH. This is where drug regulators meet to discuss best practices and release guidances. Then we have INDRF, which is the forum for the device regulators, and they develop a lot of the emerging practices in artificial intelligence and in cybersecurity. Now we also have WHO. Now, while this group is not made up of regulators, they have a different focus of helping low to middle income countries strengthen their regulatory health systems or create new ones, right? So again, they also try to release best practices, and this also complements their role in the pre-qualification program. So there have been a lot of activity coming out from these three organizations. First one, with ICH, there was a mutual recognition agreement for pharmaceutical inspections between Switzerland and the US. This is very similar to the existing ones between the US and EU and UK. For WHO, they released a regulatory framework for medical devices and IVDs with a whole section on combination products. And while it's very exciting that they're acknowledging this product type, that guidance fell short of actually putting together a concrete definition for combination products. And as I explained earlier, it is very difficult to develop a regulatory strategy without concrete, clear definitions. Then finally, INDRF. They have been releasing guidances in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. However, with ICH and INDRF, what's missing from the discussion in their guidances is a focus or even mention of combination products. I think the reason for this is, again, because almost all the regulators adopt a primary mode of action approach, where the lead center takes responsibility for the review, and thus they focus on this, I'm going to treat this as a drug, or I'm going to treat this as a device. However, as you can see, combination products are complex. They are a marriage of drug and devices. So when developing these harmonized drug guidances or device guidances, you need to consider this product category in order to ensure you are not limiting their development. So what does the future look like? What are steps that need to be taken in partnership between health authorities and industry in order to allow this space to grow? So the first, and this is more for industry to understand, is understanding the landscape. Again, because combination products are complex, not just because of the multiple pathways that and regulations they need to understand, but also the global aspect. You need to be a good reader. Understand the nuances and differences and the different regulatory tools available to you when putting together a submission package. We also need to harmonize our definitions. As you saw throughout this slide, there are differences, minute, but differences in combination product definitions. Such differences can create impediments in regulatory reliance in moments of need when trying to access drugs in your region when your current accessibility is not available. This will only become more difficult with the emergence of digital health. As we are establishing definitions for software as a medical device, we also need to be aware that the device constituent could be a software as a medical device because it could be an algorithm to determine the dose. And we need those examples present. We need those considerations present for combination products to adequately inform the definition and subsequent technical expectations. And we also need to be vocal. We need to be vocal about the special considerations for combination products. These products sometimes are multi-use. Sometimes they have shelf lives of up to 36 to 48 months. And also because of the space we've played in, specifically in the diabetes indication, we have knowledge to share. We have knowledge and lessons learned to say, these are regulatory tools that were beneficial, and this is the gap we need to close in order for us to incentivize development of combination products in this region, which, as we've seen, can also maximize the benefit of the drug. And finally, I think overall, we need to adopt a holistic approach. We cannot assess the device constituent as a silo and then say that's good enough for a drug delivery, for the drug delivery to the patient. Drug device interactions are present, they are real, especially when you look at long-term shelf life storage and the supply chain it has to go through. So there are some smart ways, like in the platforms legislation, where we can take certain elements, leverage them to reduce administrative burden and redundant testing. But ultimately, we need to look at these products holistically in the interest of patients so that they get safe and effective devices delivered. Well, thank you again for inviting me to speak about a topic that I am so passionate about and I've spent over a decade of my career pursuing, and look forward to many conferences to come. Thank you.